We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Sunday when you're listening to this. Full transparency. This is being recorded Friday night, right after I got done talking to Will. And we have Eric with us today. And this is an opportune time because Eric can break down some of the things that have been happening. So, welcome, Eric. And we were talking about this before we went on. Um, when when Will was on, the news came across that we knew that Donald Trump appealed the sending out of SNAP benefits, uh, and he appealed it to the Supreme Court. Now, the Supreme Court came back and said, yeah, we'll give you the emergency pause on it. Now, when I hear that, I hear the Supreme Court is more than willing to let people starve. So I'm upset about that. Ketanji Brown Jackson even signed off on that. And so I'm pissed. I said in the previous podcast, I think it's clear now we've got to, when we get power, we got to completely dismantle the fucking Supreme Court and start from the top. Now you came on just before the show and you said you don't hate Ketanji Brown's reasoning for the pause. You better have something fucking good.
Okay, well, first of all, love being on the show. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be back. And the reason I don't hate it, for those that haven't read it, at least according to what I read before I did a video on this ruling, is that her reasoning for pausing the lower court's ruling was the First Circuit Court of Appeals has not done anything with Donald Trump's initial appeal. Judge said Thursday, hey, you have to pay this by Friday. Friday, the administration appeals to the First Circuit Court of Appeals. And by mid afternoon, they hadn't gotten an answer from the First Circuit Court. They appealed to the Supreme Court. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson comes out and says, we're going to put a temporary pause on the lower court's ruling, forcing you to pay it just because one day was not enough time for the First Circuit Court of Appeals. But she also put in her ruling telling the First Circuit Court of Appeals to get on it, get it done with some dispatch, some quickness, but saying, okay, you need a few more days than just one. Now, we could get a ruling. By the time you hear this, we may even have a ruling out of the First Circuit Court of Appeals.
You
It's
think
not
so over the
unheard of.
weekend?
It's not unheard of that they do issue on time sensitive matters rulings over the weekend. If it's something that's not time sensitive, they would wait till Monday. But because this is time sensitive about giving people money for SNAP, we could get a ruling over the weekend. It might be Monday. But all she said was one day wasn't enough time to go ahead and, figure this out. And from that logic, I can't hate the ruling. It's unfortunate and people need their SNAP money, and I get that. But this isn't the same as them saying, okay, no, you agreed on the merits that the judge overstepped. She's not saying any of that. All she is saying is, hey, one day is too much time, or not enough time. They need a few more days.
Let me ask you this though. So they take a few more days. They come up with a ruling. They're more taking more time to do this. They come out with a ruling. Donald Trump can still appeal it again to the Supreme Court, which means more fucking time.
Yes, that way he could. But then they would be actually looking at the potentially the merits of the ruling, and that would be more of a final appeal. So if the Circuit Court of Appeal says, yeah, you have to fund it fully, we agree with the lower court. Ketanji Brown Jackson and the Supreme Court could look at it and say, yeah, you know what, we agree with it, make it happen, and they could issue a ruling, they could issue no ruling. This they could say lower court got it right and not even take it up. Now, the way I understand how the appellate court and the Supreme Court work together is that there is one justice over each of the circuits. So this was the
Right.
First Circuit Court of Appeals. Ketanji Brown Jackson is above it. She was able to by herself issue this restraining order because she is over the First Circuit Court of Appeals. She could also deny an emergency appeal on the merits, and they would have to then appeal to the full Supreme Court. Like there'd be several steps there. if she denied the next appeal, that they would have to ask the entire Supreme Court, and the full panel could say, we don't want to touch it. Lower court got it right. And as I talked about in the TikTok that will have been up by the time you see this, um, one of the things I said is between here and there is a chance they fund the government. And if they fund the government, this case doesn't matter anyway,
Right.
because
Well,
they're
let
probably
me ask you this: if Ketanji Brown does this, is it possible she did that because with 1 day looking into this, she felt like it might be more likely that the six fucking clowns would vote with Donald Trump, so they needed it more laid out so that it would be harder for these conservative justices to make the wrong decision.
that could very well be. It could be because when you're starting to deal with pressure and time constraints and things like that, um, if you're putting them on a clock, and the Supreme Court may end up taking the case even if they fund the government, because there's a question here about whether or not the court can tell the administration to fully fund a program and to find the money to fully fund a program. I could see the Supreme Court, even if this becomes moot because they funded the government, saying,
When
okay,
you
we
say
want to decide here.
wait a minute, when you say fund the government, what you're saying is open the government back up.
Well, or in this case, fund a government program,
Okay.
funding the SNAP program, um, because there was no appropriations from Congress other than this emergency fund. And the
Right.
lower court judge said, well, no, you got to pay the whole amount because people need to eat. And I understand where he's coming from. Now, where the Supreme Court may want to look at it is going, can we really do that? Because typically appropriations have to come from Congress. So can we force, can the courts actually tell an administration because the needs of the people overweigh maybe appropriations? There's going to be an interesting question here the Supreme Court may have to look at.
So, what you're talking about is something over and above the emergency fund,
Yes.
because the emergency fund was appropriated by Congress,
Yes.
and and that's where the question comes in. Okay, the courts can't tell him not to do it, but an equal branch of government that appropriated can tell them to do that. Now, if the Republicans aren't willing to do that, then it's on the Republicans and Donald Trump for people starving. Um, you mentioned something about this particular case. We'd heard that some people may have already gotten some of the SNAP funding. They may have gotten checks. Some people are suggesting it may have come from the states first as kind of an emergency fund. But you were suggesting that in some of the documentation, they've suggested they've already sent out all the emergency funding, which was about $6 billion, not all of what they need. Is that what you heard in the court documents that they said they've
Well,
already depleted that amount?
in the article I read about it, yes, they said in court documents that they have already sent out the money from the emergency fund that they would have to dip into other programs to finish funding it for the year. Now, if they have already dipped into the emergency fund and sent it to the states, that might have just happened Friday,
Right.
um, when that ruling hit. I'm not hearing anything specifically from any news articles or anything saying that the states are saying they have received emergency funds as we're recording this. I have heard that some states, like I think Minnesota, California, and some New York and some other blue states, have the funds in their state coffers to just make sure people get their full funding. And then when
Right.
the federal funding comes in, they're just going to move the money back into the state coffer and say, okay, we have our emergency fund over here. We're going to reimburse ourselves because we already dipped into it to fund it. That doesn't work so well for red states.
No, they don't have the money.
No, because most red states are taker states. And I'm not going to explain it nearly as well as Tom Powell Jr. on TikTok. But he breaks it down. He comes in with the charts and the graphs and everything. But most blue states are donor states, where for every dollar they send into the federal government, they get a fraction back. I think the worst is, I think, California, which gets 65 cents back in aid money from the federal government for every dollar they send in.
All right.
But red states like Mississippi, Alabama, Kentucky, and a bunch of them, I think the worst is, I think it's Mississippi or Alabama. I could be wrong though, where they get like $1.86 back for every dollar they kick in federal taxes.
All right.
They don't have necessarily the money in the state coffers to offset. And some of those states are going, well, we're getting even more aid from the federal government. We can cut back our state income taxes and stuff even more because the money's coming from the blue states.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So, I mean, the bottom line here is the Republicans love to blame the Democrats for the shutdown and for the SNAP stuff and all this stuff. But Donald Trump made the mistake of, in front of God and everybody, said, I want to appeal releasing the SNAP fundings. He's categorically said, I don't want these people to get the money they need to feed their families. Hopefully that gets some blowback for him, because that's not up for debate. Everybody saw it, everybody heard it, and this is what Donald Trump wants to do. He doesn't give a shit about people who don't have food.
No, he doesn't really care whether or not people have access to food. Um, in fact, he'll lie to your face about the price of food, um, which is a whole nother issue. But he doesn't care. He just cares about having the win. And if he cannot pay out the stamp benefits, he thinks that's going to get a win and pressure on Democrats for them to cave on this, um, shutdown fight, and that they're gonna, oh no, people aren't gonna eat, and they're the fact that, and that's how they used to be, that they would just give up.
Yeah.
He'd get the win. He'd appear like the tough guy. He doesn't care which way history looks at him necessarily. He wants to be perceived as the tough guy. And with that all, he's losing this government shutdown fight because right now momentum is on the side of the Democrats. In fact, uh, they went as far as they made an offer Friday to Senate Republicans. Uh, Chuck Schumer did, and while I disagree with the offer, what I said about it in the TikTok I did is this is probably the best deal Democrats will give, and it's probably going to be a limited time offer. And John Thune said non-starter. We're not even going to talk about it.
I think it was a strategic thing. It was a bare bones offer. Basically, we keep the ACA subsidies going for a year, and they gave them a bunch of other things, and they made this bare bones offer just to point out to, maybe those Democrats in Congress that were feeling a little queasy and were thinking about giving in. They did this to point out what the point of view is. Republicans don't want the shutdown to end. They don't. Otherwise, they would negotiate, and they're not. The House isn't even in Congress. The Senate doesn't want to hear shit. They are only going to settle for getting what they want, which is contrary to the whole point of Congress. But they've exposed them for who they are. They won't compromise. They want people to be without their health care. They want people paying exorbitant amounts of money for their health care. That's what the Republicans want, and they will settle for nothing less. And the Democrats did a good job exposing them for that.
Oh yeah, they did. Like I said, this is probably the best deal Democrats will give them in this shutdown. And now that they rejected it completely, they're not going to stop until they get what they want. And Democrats are going to want at least multi-year extensions of the Affordable Care Act subsidies, a return or a delay of the cuts to Medicaid, and probably more. And the longer this goes on, it only strengthens their hand. You made a good point about them putting, an idea in the heads of those that were talking about caving, because we had heard that some Senate Democrats were talking about caving because they had just had that big win in the elections on Tuesday,
Right.
that they were looking at, hey, maybe we should, back off a little bit. Maybe we should open the government back up. We proved our point. Well, no, if you don't get anything out of this shutdown fight, you're going to kill whatever momentum you have. And this is your best chance to get something. If you believe Republicans when they say, well, just open the government back up and we promise we're going to we'll have discussions about the ACA credits and everything else down the road. If you believe that again, you're dumber than a box of rocks because
Well,
they pulled that shit in March
right.
and here we are again.
And they clarified what they feel about the ACA and the subsidies. He said it today. John Thune said it's a non-starter. So now we know where they're at. I mean, we always knew that, but now they've validated that by him doing that. And I hope, and I'm wondering what you think. Do you think this solidified the Democrat stance in holding strong at this point?
I think it did. And one of the things I saw from Chuck Schumer when he was talking about this 1 year deal, he had the votes. They could have passed it. They could have gotten it through the Senate today, or today as we
Really?
were recording this, Friday. He said he had the votes. If Republicans would have agreed, he would have had the votes to get it through. They would have had the government open and it would have been over. And
Well,
they dismissed it.
now
Republicans
wait,
said
yeah.
no.
If they had done the vote and they would have passed it in the Senate, it'd still have to go back to the House because it's different than what the House sent, right? And the House
Yeah,
isn't even in fucking business.
yes, but there, I think Mike Johnson would have actually, I think he would have been able, he wouldn't have been able to duck around it any longer. And I think he would have brought the House back to vote on it, especially considering it was the best deal they were going to get in this government shutdown. Effectively, it was going to fund the entirety of government until January sometime. It was going to fund, I think, key parts of the government for a full year. And the only thing that Democrats were getting out of it was the 1 year of Affordable Care Act subsidies. This was the bare bones, as good as you are going to get offer. And I think Mike Johnson wouldn't have had a choice but to come back and vote on it.
But then you have the other issue, which I think is the origin of this whole shutdown, is if he comes back, then he has to swear in the woman from Arizona, and we've got the whole Epstein issue. I think,
Yes.
with John Thune, if they in fact had the votes in the Senate to pass this, and John Thune says it's a non-starter, that tells me only one thing. John Thune got a call from Donald Trump, and he said, "Don't you fucking dare do it." Would you agree?
That very well could be. I'm not sure if it's the only reason, um, but I think there was probably some of that in there. They haven't decided fully to walk away from Donald Trump. But that being said, we're seeing Republicans crack with Donald Trump. There's fractures there.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
2 weeks ago, I think it was, heading into the oral arguments at the Supreme Court over Donald Trump and his tariffs. 3 days straight, bipartisan support came out and they passed measures rebuking Donald Trump's tariffs and trying to overturn them.
Right.
You know, that doesn't happen if they're not starting to break. He has called repeatedly, almost daily, for Republicans to get rid of the filibuster. Filibuster's still there. That's a non-starter for Republicans. They're not going to do it. They're breaking from Donald Trump because they're afraid of what could happen here if they become the minority party. And we know they will be, maybe in 26, possibly in 28.
Right. Well, for whatever reason, he seems to still continue to have a hold. You would think that after that election, there would be a bigger break because, I mean, it was a devastating loss. They were absolutely wiped out from top to bottom. This is a hell of an omen for them going into 2026. We're now a year away from that election. And let's be honest, the way Donald Trump is running things aren't going to get better. People aren't going to feel better about Donald Trump at that point.
No, they're not. I don't know if you saw the comments made by Steve Bannon, but
Yeah.
Steve Bannon is terrified of the 2026 and 2028 midterms, or the midterms and the general in 28. He is terrified because he said to a group of Republicans that if they don't win the midterms in 28, that there is a bunch of people in the room where he was speaking. He goes, there's a bunch of us in this room that will go to prison. Well, what would you go to prison for? Maybe breaking the law?
Yeah.
We're not like Donald Trump and the Republicans. The next presidential candidate for the Democrats isn't going to sit there and tell the DOJ to go after their enemies and throw them in jail for anything. No, you're going to get charged for doing something fucked up that you shouldn't have done.
But here's the thing. If they don't if they lose in the midterms, 26, um, and the Democrats get the House and the Senate. I don't know. I think him saying them going to jail is probably a little bit of bullshit because as much as we would have power in the House and the Senate, the DOJ is still the DOJ, and the DOJ is not going to prosecute Steve Bannon while Pam Bondi or somebody that's under Donald Trump is there. That's the thing is we get power in the Congress. All we really do is get to make Donald Trump impotent and carry on hearings. But as far as prosecutions, you need a DOJ that's fairly decent, and we don't have one, even
Well, I've
after
been think
26.
well, I've been thinking about that. In part, he was talking about both 26 and 28. He
Okay.
specifically mentioned 28. So he's afraid of when there's a Democratic president
Oh, yeah.
that there's going to
Then
be
there's some
major
worry.
deal, some worry. But one of the things that I think he's afraid of about having the Democrats in Congress, not only is it going to prevent Donald Trump from doing anything, as we talk about a lot, even having one of the two chambers kills anything for Donald Trump getting anything done. But there's going to be all kinds of congressional public hearings,
Yeah.
which is going to sour everybody on the Republican Party for 28, which then sets up the possibility of having a Democratic president in 28 with a better attorney general, not Merrick Garland. But also, if there are these hearings, maybe stuff gets brought to light where they can start looking at state level charges where the DOJ isn't even involved.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, that's what's going to happen if we get Congress in 2026. Nothing will get accomplished. No bills will be passed because even if our Congress passes a bill, unless it's a supermajority, Donald Trump's going to veto it. He's going to veto everything that Congress passes. But you're absolutely right. If we can't pass a bill, then we have hearing after hearing and expose the crimes and corruption that all these motherfuckers do. And they don't like that idea because, like you say, in 2026 to 2028, if it's nothing but exposing crimes, that doesn't bode well for them come the 2028 election.
No, it doesn't. Um, and the only thing that would pass with a Democratic majority in either house of Congress, the House or the Senate, would be funding bills. And
Yeah.
those would be pure continuing resolution after continuing resolution. That's it. It would be just, okay, we're going to fund the government, and there would be enough pressure to put onto Donald Trump, probably, to have him just keep signing it. And that's if he's even around after the midterms. We've talked about it a lot. His health may not allow him to continue. I mean, just the other day, he had this Asian meeting with all these Asian delegates and stuff, and it looked like he was falling asleep sitting there.
Yeah.
His face was
Yeah.
starting to droop just sitting there because he had a busy day. His health is getting worse every single day.
I'm not even sure he makes it to 2026. And our friend Ed is still sticking by Thanksgiving. That's coming closer. And Donald Trump is kind of a cockroach. So I don't know what's going to take him out. But the Republicans have to be feeling a little nervous about this. You talked about the cracks in the Republican Party. We're seeing the cracks, but when things look as dire as they are, the economy sucks. Public opinion is horrible. The polls are horrible, and Donald Trump keeps making stupid decisions based on his own benefit. The Republicans have to be at a point right now. You would think, I mean, I would have thought they would have been this a year ago, a year and a half ago, that if we keep standing by Donald Trump, I'm going to be out of fucking business. I mean, we saw what happened on Tuesday with those elections. It could be worse in 2026. A lot of motherfuckers sitting in that particular uh, House of Representatives will not be there. They'll be gone. Some, I mean, 60 of them or so are retiring anyway.
Yeah, I mean, they got to be very concerned about what's going to happen here. The cracks are forming because they have to break from Donald Trump. They should have done it a long time ago. We've talked about it a lot. The time for them to break from Donald Trump was January 7th, 2021, the day after January 6th. They
Exactly.
should have broke from Donald Trump and stay broken from Donald Trump. But unfortunately, Kevin McCarthy was a spineless motherfucker and he went down and he bent the knee and, you know, kissed the ring. They need to walk away from Donald Trump. It's getting too late for them. There's a lot of them looking around going, we may not get elected. And that's why you're seeing people like Marjorie Taylor Greene coming out as the voice of reason of her party, which I'm still baffled by the fact that we keep saying it, but she is. She's coming out saying the things. She still has her deep MAGA moments where she says some dumb fucked up shit, but more and more she is sounding reasonable. And you're going to see a lot of these MAGA fucks do that because they know by the time it's done, the MAGA movement is going to be a thing of the past. When Donald Trump is gone, being connected to MAGA is going to be a thing, and or you're not going to be a thing anymore. That or at least not a thing that's winnable for elections. So they're going to have to rebrand, reimagine, and Marjorie Taylor Greene is getting out in front of all of them because she sees the writing on the wall.
Well, and that's the ironic thing. Marjorie Taylor Greene isn't the smartest among that group, but what she's seeing is what other Republicans are seeing, that no SNAP benefits, the shutdown, health care, it's going to affect her constituents in probably a poorer part of Georgia significantly. She is going to be hated if she doesn't do what she's doing. And for the only difference between her and the other representatives, for whatever reason, she's no longer afraid of Donald Trump. I don't know why. Maybe she has something on Donald Trump, but that's the big difference with Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's not afraid. All these other motherfuckers that can see exactly what she sees apparently still have fear of Donald Trump.
Yeah, they do. They're definitely afraid of Donald Trump for whatever reason. And I don't know if it's entirely Donald Trump himself or like we've talked about on other podcasts, if it's they're afraid of the 25 to 30% of the Republican Party, the MAGA base, that when he says go vote him out, will show up and vote. I
Yeah.
mean, I did a video on this earlier this week, and I at least at first I thought this was a satire, a joke account or a joke thing, but it was legit. I even found a story about it on Fox News.
Wow.
Okay. Um, the Secretary of State for Kentucky had to come out and issue a statement that there are no statewide elections in Kentucky and that no, you cannot vote for the mayor of New York City from Kentucky. You cannot vote for the governor of Virginia from Kentucky because
Yeah.
we're dealing with a group of people that, oh, it's election day, got to go vote. I hear about them talking about elections. I got to go vote. Got to go vote for the Republican. Not paying a lick of mind to anything. Not seeing political signs. Not seeing. They probably weren't getting any ads. None of that. None of that mattered to them. It just they'd heard people talking about voting. Time to go vote for a Republican.
Or
This is what we're
Mondami for
fighting.
that matter. A lot of people want, when we hear that about Mondami and people wanting to vote for Mondami in Kansas or Kentucky and not understanding why they can't, I mean, it further points out what I've said before. We've got an epidemic of stupid in this country. But more importantly, it's something I've said before. When we talk about the next candidate for the Democratic nomination to the presidency, we've got to really take a look at where this country is at. I mean, we're kind of dumbed down as a country. And one of the reasons why Donald Trump or Mondami is winning is because of how much they're in the news, how popular they are, how much noise they make. We've got to create a candidate with a brand. We got to brand the candidate so people can get behind him. You know, whether they hate him or they love him, they need that kind of engagement with these candidates in order to win these days. It's a much different election process than it was once was. It's not about policies, it's not about anything. Who's your guy? Who's your gal? And that's what we should be thinking about when we're looking at getting the next candidate for president, or even in the midterms too. We need people speaking out. Democrats are tired of getting being the whipping boys. If you appeal to or are nice to the Republicans, they fucking hate you. If you're in there fighting like a John Ossoff or a Eric Swalwell, they love you. So take note of that and maybe do that instead of being the pussy ass bitch half these fuckers are.
Yeah, what I've said is we need an FDR style candidate. Somebody, maybe kind of a mix of what you're saying about building a brand, but
Yeah,
also coming down, dumbing it down, and making it simple. Talking
yeah.
about maybe a fair deal for the American people. Talking about, okay, livable wage, et cetera. Just the few things, keep it to like 3 or 4 points that people actually care about, and then move on. Don't get into tons and tons of things going on. And I think that was not entirely everything that was wrong with Kamala Harris, but there was so much going on that they were trying to focus on. I think some of the message got lost in the mix. Specifically, she had great policies about helping people, first time home buyer credit, better wages, all of these things. But it got lost in the mix of talking about how bad Donald Trump was going to be as president. Now, she was right with everything she said.
Yeah.
But the problem here is that they lost the message. And that's what they need to do. They need to get a decent message going, making sure that it is working, that we get everything going. And, you know, like you said, we have to have a fighting message, but we also have to be willing to do something. The message can't just be, well, we're not Republicans, vote us in.
Well, I think the problem lies in our politicians and in our media. I had somebody come on my live the other day and they said, I've been listening to you for 4 years. Um, I've learned more about politics than I ever knew before. Now, it's not that I'm any genius. I've said before, when I look at politics, I'm really concerned about it. So I look deep into it and I need to get it down in simple terms so my simple mind can get it. And with those simple terms, that's what I put out. That you simplify and explain things that the media does not. People need to know what the actual facts are and the truth are. People are either too busy or unmotivated to dig in for themselves. So that message has to be sent. I try to do it with mine. You try to do it with yours, and it seems to pay off. But politicians and the media just throw out, clickbait and general stuff and stuff that's not accurate or just twisted in some way. We've got a country full of either uninformed or ill-informed people in this country. And that's what needs to be addressed. People need to know exactly what the fuck is going on.
Yeah, you're right. We need to address it. We need to talk about it. You and I break things down into simple terms. And I think part of the reason why people like my analysis is I come at it pretty level headed,
Yeah.
um, which keeps the emotion out of it. And then I'm looking at things from that non emotional standpoint and I break it down. Okay, it sounds scary, but this can't happen. That can't happen. Like whenever we talk about Donald Trump maybe not making it, one of the first things I see comments in comment sections going, "Oh God, that means Mike Johnson's going to be VP." No, he will never. The only time he becomes anywhere in the line of command is if something happens to Trump and Vance at the same time. Then he steps in. Period. There's nothing about him stepping up anywhere else. Same with when people like Steve Bannon and Donald Trump float this idea that when Donald Trump is going to be out in 2029. Now, we both think he may not make it to 2029.
Yeah, I
So it
know.
may not even matter. But they talk about, well, he's going to be out in 2029. Okay. He's going to run as JD Vance's VP. And then Vance is going to, resign almost immediately, give Donald Trump another full term. First of all, there's multiple things wrong with that. If you are a VP who succeeds another person to be president, um, you can only serve up to 10 years, period.
Right.
So even if that happened, Donald Trump would only get 2 years max. They're not going to waste their shot in 28 for a 4 year president and take JD Vance out of the equation to put Donald Trump in, especially with things going as bad when he's got such a horrible approval rating and all of those things going on now. Um, Beyond that, the 12th Amendment is one we don't talk about hardly ever, but it applies here. The 12th Amendment says if you are ineligible to be president, you are ineligible to be vice president.
Right.
Well, 22nd Amendment says Donald Trump has served his 2 terms. He would be out. That
Right.
means no VP shot. He can't do it. But people get caught up in the emotion. They get caught up in the fear of this could happen that it terrifies them.
I would say this and see if you think I'm right about this. There is no way Mike Johnson or any Speaker of the House could ever be vice president. No way he could be vice president because if something happens to the president, the VP sends to the presidency, and then they immediately start looking for a vice president. Like you said, the only time a Speaker of the House is in line, it's for the presidency, and that's if something happened to both of them simultaneously and there was nobody. It's an emergency situation, whether it be Hakeem Jeffries or Mike Johnson. He would never ascend to the vice presidency because as soon as the vice president moved up, he would be finding and trying to get approved another vice president.
The only way Mike Johnson, for example, would become the VP is if, let's say, Donald Trump chokes on that Big Mac like we're all hoping for, and then he goes ahead and he croaks. Okay. We get JD Vance. If JD Vance were to pick Mike Johnson,
Right, right.
then he could become VP, but it would never be automatic.
Yeah,
Um, Now, I never really followed The West Wing,
neither did I.
um, but I've been seeing a lot of clips on it, and there's some great moments in there. And apparently, there was a clip I just saw recently, and I don't have the full context of the episode, but something was going on where the president's daughter in the show, I think, had been kidnapped or something, and he needed to temporarily step down long enough to get that situation dealt with one way or the other because he couldn't make a good decision. He's like, my judgment's now compromised.
Right.
And I don't know where the VP was in this situation, but in that particular episode that I saw, and again, I only saw part of a clip, he steps down and the Speaker of the House became acting president during this situation. But I don't know where the VP was in
Yeah.
any of that. Again, but and that maybe that's where people are getting this idea from that it was
A
um
TV show.
well, yeah, you know, I don't know, but the reality is Mike Johnson does not automatically advance. He will not just become VP. And realistically, he may not even be Speaker of the House by the end of the year.
You might not be Speaker of the House by the end of the next week. He is hanging by a thread here. He's getting hit from all sides. I mean, if I'm Mike Johnson, I'll fucking quit. He's in a no-win situation. He either pisses off the general public. His own home state is going to be in dire shape for healthcare and SNAP and food and money from the shutdown. And if he sides with Trump, he's going to upset them. And if he goes against Trump, he's done anyway. I don't see Mike Johnson being able to last as Speaker of the House very long. There's too much trouble, and they're going to try to make it look like his fault and then pass it off to somebody else. And hopefully, it'll look like it's going to get better.
Well, I've been talking about this, and here's what I think may happen to Mike Johnson. Now, there are three outcomes, well, four outcomes that are all bad for Mike Johnson.
Does any of this have
Okay.
anything to do with Grinder?
Not that I'm aware of,
Okay, well, go
but
ahead.
but maybe. Um, Now, outcome one is they come back, Senate accepts some kind of a deal. They pass something. So they have to bring the House back to vote on a resolution. Okay. And they've caved to Democrats at all. He brings the House back. They pass it and send it to Donald Trump's desk. Well, Donald Trump may still sign it to get the win for opening the government back up, regardless of whether or not they cave. But because he had to sign this deal, and that was the only way they could open the government, he could call somebody in Congress and say, get rid of Mike Johnson.
Yeah.
They hold a vote to get rid of Mike Johnson. Okay. It would only take a few Republicans and all Democrats to vote him out because there's
Right.
such a narrow majority in the House of Representatives. Okay. Option two, they do the same thing. They still pass the funding bill, like I said, with concessions to Democrats. They don't vote him out. They don't even attempt it. Donald Trump just decides to move on. They leave it alone. But then they swear in Representative Grijalva. Now they have to hold a vote on the Epstein files. Donald Trump
Right.
instead calls him and says, get rid of Speaker Johnson because he didn't kill the Epstein files.
Right.
Same situation. Democrats could vote out Mike Johnson. Okay. Option three, they show up. Let's just say they pass a funding bill and Donald Trump says, okay, whatever. They vote on the Epstein files. Donald Trump says, well, I can still kill it. Not a big deal. We'll worry about that later. Marjorie Taylor Greene has already introduced a resolution to vote out Mike Johnson that has never been brought for a vote. And she has said she plans to bring it for a vote.
Right.
So there's three options to get rid of Mike Johnson.
Let me
And
ask you this.
again,
Let me ask you this, though. I floated this as a strategy. I don't think Donald Trump wants the government open again because there's too much hanging on the Epstein files. What if Donald Trump says, get rid of Mike Johnson, and then it takes 2 months to find another Speaker of the House, and we're delayed more?
that could happen. However, one of the things that I think I've been floating as another option, I guess this wasn't one of the ones about Mike Johnson, but what could happen is after a couple of weeks of not getting a speaker, and if the government is still shut down, it would only take three or four Republicans to say, okay, our party can't lead here. We need to do something. We're voting in Hakeem Jeffries.
Wow. We talked about that before early on, and I think during Biden's administration, and I never thought that would ever happen. But with the way things are going, and if there is a pushback on Donald Trump and people stepping away from him, that could conceivably happen. If they felt like Donald Trump was trying to stagnate Congress, which he's done, they're not doing anything. Um, that could happen. Wouldn't that be hilarious?
Yeah. And the reason I say it could happen is just because, especially if the government is shut down and the shot was called by Donald Trump to get rid of Mike Johnson,
Right.
you know. But here's the thing. Without Democrats, it would take almost all Republicans to oust Mike Johnson. So if the government is shut down, that brings up option four, the fourth option I was thinking of.
I know what
And
you're
now
going with. It.
this is the one that is actually worse for Mike Johnson, and it could end up leading to him having a second motion to vacate. But Democrats go to him and say, look, they called a motion to vacate you. We'll save your ass. You get this passed. You pass our funding deal with what we want, 3 years of Affordable Care Act subsidies, 2 years, whatever the number is, and some of the money back for Medicaid. You pass that, we'll save you. And because we get something out of it.
Wouldn't it be kind of in your face too, knowing the Republicans and Donald Trump want to get rid of Mike Johnson, and just for the sake of pissing them off, owning a Trumplafuck, they say, fuck it, we're going to support him. We're not going to let you get rid of him.
It could, but they have no reason to save him if they don't get something out of it, I don't think, other than maybe
No, I
to own
agree.
the Republicans. Um, but see, with as much bullshit as he has pulled on them, it's like Kevin McCarthy. They saved him once, they didn't save him the second time. Because in between, he quit negotiating in good faith. He was backstabbing them. He was doing things like that. Well, suddenly they said, well, fuck you then. We don't need to save you.
Right.
And they let him suffer. There is such a narrow majority in the House. I think it takes 6 votes from Republicans to call for a motion to vacate the chair. Okay. Which means 6 Republicans have to agree that they want to get rid of Speaker Johnson. Those 6 are enough with all Democrats to get rid of Mike Johnson
Right. Right.
because they are such a narrow majority. And this is where Republicans are much weaker than Nancy Pelosi. When she was Speaker of the House, there was not a motion to vacate allowed. It was, I'm Speaker, you vote me in. We're not putting any sort of a rule in there. Once I'm in, I'm in. And she got elected on one ballot every single time.
Yeah. I wanted to bring up something somebody brought up in a live because they think they had something there. And I didn't necessarily agree with them, but I didn't know for sure until I looked into it. Then I did look into it. This gentleman, nice guy, Dwizzle, I think his name is, great guy. He said, listen, there's another special election in Tennessee on December 2nd. A Republican will no doubt win that. So if they win that, if they delay it to that point, then they need 219 votes, as if it changes the parameters for this thing. Now, I looked into it, and the fact of the matter is the total amount of people in the House of Representatives is 435 people. Okay. So 218 is the number, regardless of who gets elected in Tennessee in December. 218 is the number. That's what they need. And I
Yes.
presume they did that on purpose so that it was the majority of the full House.
Well, 435 is the House, exactly what you said. Half of 435 is 217 and a half. And
Right.
because so to get a majority, you need 218. It is
Right.
legitimately just what you said, of the full majority. Um, it doesn't change the numbers if they get this guy elected in Tennessee. And there's another election that is going to be happening in January. That,
Oh, really?
but it's one. I think it's January. They haven't fully set the date. It's for that district in Texas.
Oh, okay.
There's going to be a runoff, and they had like 16 candidates that were on the ballot this past Tuesday. They did not do a primary for any party. It was just anybody who wanted to run got on the ballot as long as you met the criteria. Top 2 go to a runoff. Well, it's a Democrat versus a Democrat.
Oh, wow.
So it's going to be a Democrat pickup because there's no write-in option. There's not, it was already a Democratic seat. That was I don't remember who the representative was that held that seat, but for whatever reason, there was a Democratic seat open. And it's going to be filled by a Democrat, but the 2 choices are 2 Democrats. So when that seat gets filled, he could be holding up potentially if they're still doing this bullshit of not swearing in Representative Grijalva, et cetera. We could be staring at 3 seats that are open.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I heard a story, and I'm wondering if you heard this story. You probably know more details about it. We know that Michael Wolff, the writer who had spent time with Epstein, he claims that while he was talking to Epstein, Epstein went into a vault, pulled out some pictures, and in those pictures, it showed Donald Trump with young girls on his lap without the benefit of tops, which would be very damning evidence against Donald Trump. Now, what I heard, and I'm curious because I didn't have time to verify it, but it wouldn't surprise me. What I've heard is there's been some leaks out of the FBI from some of the rank and file, that the evidence that they have, pictures and videos or whatever, are way worse than what Michael Wolff has seen. Pam Bondi has seen these. That would suggest why she wouldn't answer the question when she's asked if she's seen these things. Um, did you hear anything about that leak about this being worse?
I've heard that it might be worse than what they thought, and that is why they are trying to avoid the Epstein files. And that is just because, uh, if it is that bad, they're not going to be able to spin this away. Donald Trump
Right.
has been trying to make it sound like, oh, it was no big deal. Oh, you didn't know what Palm Beach was like in the 90s. You know, I mean, I remember the 90s. Now, granted, I wasn't in Palm Beach. I was here in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, but I don't remember it being acceptable to be a full grown adult who would have been in his what 40s
Yeah.
having young girls under the age of 18 topless sitting on your lap.
Or
I
whatever
mean,
else.
or whatever else. I mean, that was especially, depending on who was involved, etc. That was a good way to get your ass kicked.
I was 35 years old living in Minnesota, and that wasn't a thing here. It definitely wasn't a thing. I know my wife would have frowned on it, but but
I mean, and I realize those rich elite social circles are something entirely different than, probably the areas we were living in at the time. But it was frowned upon for the most part. But these rich elites like Donald Trump, they were all the ones that were involved with Epstein. They just found a way to make it work, and they thought they had their tracks covered up well enough. And now it's coming back to bite them. And if this is as bad as it could be, oh, buddy, Donald Trump is afraid of the public outcry. He's not ashamed of what he did because he doesn't care about that. He just
right.
knows that the public opinion is going to be against him and that it's going to be way worse for him by doing that.
Well, here's what I know for sure. I don't know a lot about the law, but in 1995, pedophilia and child sex trafficking wasn't less illegal than it is now. It just it just wasn't. It was illegal then. And regardless if you're rich and influential and entitled, it was still illegal. And if you don't know that, then why would you continue to want to hide the pictures and the videos? You know it's illegal. And that's what I'm getting to now. We have this shutdown, we have the SNAP issue, we have the healthcare issue. It's my contention that right at this point, Donald Trump only ever cares about himself. And this Epstein file thing is devastating to him, his legacy, a lot of people around him, people in Congress. I think, based on what Thune did, they don't want to open up the government. They're happy with it shut down, keeping everything stagnated. And it's all strictly because of the Epstein files. It's not about money. It's about saving Donald Trump and anybody else who's involved embarrassment and
Yeah, I think
possible
you're right.
prosecution.
I think you're right because they're trying to find a way to bury these Epstein files. And the problem is they're dealing with something they never thought they'd have. They have four rank and file members of the Republican Party that are breaking ranks,
Right.
and including two that you never would have thought would have broken from MAGA. That being Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Right. I think that so where does that put us though? I mean, if Donald Trump doesn't want it opened and he has a thumb on the neck of Thune and Mike Johnson, do we then just sit here and never open up for God knows how long?
Actually, I've been floating a theory over on the Analytical Iowan podcast that of what might happen. And this is a hairball theory. Maybe it's harebrained, I don't know. But because it seems like the Epstein files is one of the reasons why Mike Johnson is not bringing the House back into session. What would happen if one more Republican says fuck it I want to get back to work. We've got to do something. This is what's holding us up. And they signed the discharge petition.
I could see that as a possibility. I mean, these people who aren't signing the petition are still hidden. What we know about this discharge petition, it's not like they sign this and immediately the files get released. Fact of the matter is, the files probably won't get released in spite of this because it'll go to the Senate, has to pass the Senate, and Donald Trump will certainly veto it. It's the matter of them having to own up what they believe in this situation. Do I want the Epstein files released or do I not? And in each case, it's damned if you do and damned if you don't, because they're either going to piss off their constituents and not get reelected, or they're going to piss off Donald Trump and have to deal with whatever Donald Trump is threatening them with.
Yeah, exactly. And they don't want to end up voting on it. They want it to die. But simple fact is, when it comes to light, they're going to be forced to make a choice. And one of the things I've been floating around, and I think you and I have talked about it before, is just because they haven't signed the discharge petition, when it actually comes down to nut cutting time and voting for it, this thing could pass with 100 Republicans voting to release the files. It's
Well, that's
possible.
exactly right. That's exactly right. When they're put in the position to have to vote, they have to make a choice between Donald Trump and their livelihood. When they're pressured like this, they don't want the pressure, but they might vote with the release of the files just because they want to save themselves. And if Donald Trump's power is diminishing, and it seems like it is, it would be easier for them to do that.
Yeah, it's if they side against Donald Trump on this, it is going to be a big move against Donald Trump. Now he'll try to primary them all and he'll try to call them all rhinos and stuff. But if they move 100 of them against him, that's going to be hard to say. And if they get back to work, and that was the other thing, I think, as we're talking about it, with them not being there, the House Oversight Committee that was looking into the Epstein files isn't there. They're not doing work. So those releases aren't coming out either. So not only are they not releasing it with the discharge petition, the House isn't releasing them through the Oversight Committee either. Again, protecting Donald Trump. This whole thing, when it comes crashing down around him, um, they will end up just having to deal with it. You know, Republicans are going to make a choice. Do they stand with Donald Trump? Do they stand with their voters? And more basic than that, do they stand on the side of what is right? Do they want to be known as, trying to protect people who have done these horrible things to kids? And the answer should be, I mean, this shouldn't even be a question of does it get a vote.
No.
This should pass 435 to 0. It should go to the
Right.
Senate. It should pass 100 to 0, period, because of what we're talking about. But it's not, because they don't they have a political reason to keep it hidden, because it affects Donald Trump and donors and wealthy elites and all of this, and they're scared.
They are terrified. And Donald Trump is doing just what Donald Trump always does. Everything with him, whether it be his court cases or anything else that he doesn't want to deal with, delay, divert, distract, delay, delay, delay. And he has to know that this is going to come out eventually, whether he's president at the time or not. It's going to come out. He's just doing everything he can to delay. Maybe he's hoping to die before it comes out.
Maybe, but see, that's the thing with Donald Trump, though. He doesn't believe in his own mortality.
True.
You ask him,
True.
he's as fit as he was 40 years ago, and he's
Yeah.
as sharp as he was 40 years ago, and he's going to live till he's 112. You know, fact of the matter is, he may not see 80.
No, he may not see 80. That's June, and he's not in good shape currently. So if Donald Trump keeps pushing this and tries to continue to keep the government shut down, we know Thune got the best offer he could get. And he said, nah, that's a non starter. The House isn't working. If Donald Trump gets his wish and keeps the country shut down, people not getting SNAP payments, health care going through the roof, How long does this last before there's an uprising?
I don't know. I really don't know how long it lasts before they do something and actually, they force the government to, to come back open. People are going to be pissed when things don't go their way, when they don't have access to food. And this goes beyond just this month. Sure, maybe
Yeah,
this court case gets November paid, but what about December?
we'll be going through
What
this
hap-
same shit over and over again.
what happens in January? What happens when healthcare costs rise like unexpectedly, in December, in January, and we're dealing with that now. They don't have any sort of issue. They don't have any way of dealing with it. Their off ramp is just give us what we want, we'll open the government. But I don't think they want to actually do it, or they would have taken this offer. Now that they've rejected a bare bones offer, that actually just gives Democrats more of a reason to jump in and do even more and say, okay, you're going to do X, Y, and Z.
Republicans are kind of like the little kid that was out running around the neighborhood, got in trouble, did something wrong, and the neighbor called mom and dad. So they know when they get home, they're in trouble. So they just don't go home. That's kind of the same thing. They know there's an ass whooping coming, and they just want to avoid it as much as possible. That's human nature, but it can only last so long
Mm-hmm.
because there's a lot. And this is what you have to understand about Donald Trump. Donald Trump doesn't care about people starving. He doesn't care about the economy. He doesn't care. All he's trying to do is protect himself. And people will go along with that for a while, obviously, but there has to come a point where they say, fuck it, enough. You can't do this anymore. We can't save you anymore.
Yeah, and I think that is gonna, the longer this goes on, they're gonna come to a breaking point. I mean, they've already said, no, we're not getting rid of the filibuster. And they said that because they're looking long term. They're looking past Donald Trump. They're
They
saying,
got to
hey,
be.
we might be the minority party in 26. We're probably going to be the minority party in 28. And if we get rid of the filibuster and there's a Democratic House and a Democratic president, if we don't have the filibuster, we can't stop them from doing everything. And it's like you've talked about when you talk about the filibuster. If the Democrats get rid of it and they pass a bunch of shit that people like, they don't have to worry about being the minority party again. And
No.
Republicans, I think, are aware of exactly how popular those policies from Democrats are going to be. They don't know how to counter it at this point. They don't know their fiscal conservative ways isn't working in part because that voter demographic that would have gone for that, they're not with us anymore. The younger voters are saying, fuck it. We can't live. Fix it for us. Do something. We have to be able to afford a house. We need to be able to afford groceries. We need to be able to afford to eat. We have to be able to afford just to live. And we're not, you know, minimum wage, for example, hasn't gone up since 2009. We have people who are almost going to be turning adults that would have been born after the last minimum wage increase. They'd be 16 now. That's a long time for it not to go up, and it hasn't kept up with the cost of anything.
I mean, you think about it. If the Democrats get in, do away with the filibuster, which I think they should do, and they bring in universal health care, loan forgiveness, higher wages, who's going to vote Republican? The
Why
people.
would you?
Yeah, why would you? I mean, that's all you have to do. But here's the problem too we have with the Democrats. As much as the Democrats seem like the good guys and the Republicans are the bad guys, when it comes to universal health care, when it comes to um, um, loan forgiveness, there's people in the Democratic Party that get their pockets filled by the same people the Republicans do, and they will push back against it. So there's going to have to be a moment in time once the Republicans are clear that the Democrats are put under pressure to either do the right thing or get the fuck out.
Yeah, you're right. And as that goes, that we have to deal with. you know, these Democrats, we can't just give them a free pass because they have a D next to their name. We're not
No,
Republican. Republicans get a free pass regardless. Um, and, like we were just talking about a bit ago, people in Kentucky wanted to go vote when there were no voting going on in Kentucky. Now, I don't know how many people that was, but there's a lot of Republicans in Kentucky. So you assume it's Republicans. They just want to go show up, vote for the candidate with the R next to their name, and move on. We can't do the same thing as Democrats. Now, that being said, should we vote for a Democrat, whoever runs in the moment? Yes, but then we have to hold them accountable once they're in power. If they don't start working for us, we need to start primarying them. We need to say, hey, you know what? You're not the candidate we want. Does that mean we vote for a Republican? No, we just need to run somebody against them and try to get them out. We also need to just call them right and do all of those things, email, uh, and let them know how unhappy we are with what they're doing if they're not working for us.
you know, for decades, Democrats have been hands off and apathetic, and that's why we're in this position right now. What we have to understand is when we do the work and get the Republicans out, the work has just begun. We've got to be hands on voters. We've got to be holding every Democrat's feet to the fire. I don't care if APAC gives you money. I don't care if the insurance lobby gives you money. You're going to do it for us or you're going to find a new fucking job. And we have to be that strong with it. Uh, when we get the power, because it's not a complete win until everybody is working for us. And I, I guarantee you, not all Democrats are working for us.
No, they're not. Um, and you know, and we need to do what we can to get rid of the ones that aren't. And some of them are going by the wayside on their own. And this isn't a knock on her specifically, but Nancy Pelosi has decided to retire.
Yeah, thank God.
And she had what, 40-year career, 39-year career, something like that
That's
by the
getting
time she
reelected
retired.
every 2 years.
Right. I mean, that's impressive. She was the first female Speaker of the House. Great. I'm not diminishing anything she has done, but as I talk about with people on both sides of the aisle, that she has far fewer years left looking at it objectively than she has behind her. There's
Right.
no way she makes it to 170. It's just not going to happen.
The way I
But
look
she
at
was still there.
Nancy Pelosi is like milk. You buy a carton of milk. You love milk. Milk is good. But once you get past the expiration date, you don't put that shit in your mouth. And that's where Nancy Pelosi is. She did a good job. She was a good Speaker of the House. She was impressive, but she's 85 now. She's playing in a field that's no longer relevant. She's playing in the 90s and the early 2000s. That's not what politics is anymore. She wants to stick to that. Hakeem Jeffries and Schumer want to stick to that. It ain't going to work. They either adapt to what's going on or they get the fuck out. And I'm talking about Hakeem Jeffries. Nancy Pelosi's 85. When are you going to fucking retire and relax? You did your job. You were impressive. Now you're ineffective or in the wrong. Get the fuck out.
Well, she said she's not seeking reelection.
Right.
So
But
she
that's
has effectively retired, which is good.
but
But
that's a year from
we,
now.
yeah, but okay, we can deal with her for a year. We're not in power anyway. We can't pass anything anyway. She can
Right.
play the old school, object to everything politics. And I don't want to sound like I'm diminishing anything she has done. I'm not. Simple fact of the matter is, you're right. We need to get other people in. And that, like you said, that includes Hakeem Jeffries. Now, we will have to see what happens when Hakeem Jeffries becomes potentially speaker. Next Congress after the midterms, presuming that Democrats win. Right now, it looks like he would be Speaker of the House,
Right.
and we'll have to see what kind of a job he does.
He could
And if
get
he doesn't,
challenged too.
and the fact that he would be Speaker with a Republican president would be a huge challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, but he could get challenged. Somebody else could step up and say, okay, I want to run maybe AOC.
Yeah.
And that could you could take the temperature of the Democratic Party at that point, see where they stand, and go from there because they have to figure something out here. They can't keep going by the old rules. Republicans aren't playing by the old rules. Why should Democrats?
Yeah. Now you mentioned there are cracks in the Republican Party and with Donald Trump. There's no question about that. He's losing power, effectiveness every day. Not enough, but we had oral arguments for Donald Trump's tariffs in front of the Supreme Court. A lot of us looked at the Supreme Court, another gimme for Donald Trump, and they were going to just say, yeah, you can do whatever you want. However, the questioning during that oral arguments was interesting because he got a lot of pushback, not only from the liberal judges, but or justices, but the conservative justices there. It's conceivable that they would find that he doesn't have the legal right. I mean, if they read the Constitution or something, they might say that. But if they find against him, and Donald Trump is worried about it because he came out and said, he threatened them. He basically said, if you find against me in the tariffs thing, it will be horrible for the country. We'll have to pay back all this money. It will be devastating for the country. We'll never survive it. Uh, but if they find against him, you talk about a fucking crack. That's going to be a crack. That may be the kill shot, if you will.
It could. And that line of questioning was very interesting because they were pushing and pushing pretty hard against him because they kept saying, okay, what about this? What about that? They basically said tariffs are a tax and the power to tax lies with Congress. They even got his attorney for the DOJ to admit that tariffs are a tax and that I think he said they are 80% paid by the American people. They're not. They're 100% paid by the American people ultimately.
They always
Because,
say that. They go, whenever they ask him who pays for it, well, there's a lot of things that could be happening. The country could pay for it. The middleman could eat it. That's all bullshit. And then they had to say something, so they said 80%. But I think you're right. It's 100%. Nobody is in business and has an increase in cost and doesn't pass it along. That would be stupid.
yeah, exactly. That's what I've, and usually from what I've seen when it comes to costs going up is like one company I worked for, even though they own their own warehouse, okay, while I worked there, they made their warehouse have to turn a profit. So if an item came in and it went up by 3% at the warehouse now raised that price by 5%, for example, because they still had to make a profit margin on that item. They didn't just raise
Right.
it the 3%, their cost went up. It went over and above, and they had to make even more money. So every step of the way would go up with these tariffs. And they like to duck and dodge around it. I think ultimately, based on the line of questioning and by how this Supreme Court has handled other cases, I think it is entirely possible that this Supreme Court rules against Donald Trump. And that may be what it ultimately takes for congressional Republicans to start ruling against Donald Trump, for them to break between that and this government shutdown. If they have to cave and they realize, okay, their voters are going to be pissed. I mean, we are coming up to the holiday season. You have
Yeah.
Thanksgiving in a couple of
Worst
weeks.
time. Worst
You
time
have
possible.
Christmas in a little over a month. They're going to have to start answering to voters. And once we get through the holiday season, then we start primary season in earnest. And
Yeah.
they're going to have to go back and answer to their voters and to primary challengers saying, hey, you need to reelect me because I'm working for you. And how can they go back to their voters and say, you need to reelect me, you need to give me another chance, don't vote in my primary challenger if the government's still shut down and food stamps haven't gone out in 3 months and this program hasn't had its money in 3 months. It just down the line, it's going to get to a point where it's indefensible. I mean, it already should have been, but you know, Donald Trump is going to have to end up either giving in here or Republicans are going to have to break because I don't see Democrats bending at all.
No, and they shouldn't bend. I mean, this is the one time they should stand strong and fight. Um, I'm thinking, we've seen a lot of people resign or retire. I have a feeling if this continues longer, you're going to see more people retire because they're going to see the writing on the wall. No way they're getting reelected.
No, they're not. There's a lot of them that are challenging it. They're saying, I can't do this. I'm going to retire. I'm going to run for governor. I'm going to seek other office. Some of them have just realized that they sunk themselves, like Joni Ernst here in Iowa, saying, "Yeah, we're all going to die anyway." Talking about dying because they can't afford their medical care because of Medicaid cuts,
Yeah.
or yeah, Medicaid cuts, and the whole thing. There's so many of them that are saying, "I can't do this anymore," because they would rather go out on their own terms than get voted out. Because if they don't get voted out, if they don't lose an election, they can spin it and they can maybe come back around and run for something else and maybe still get elected there. You're going to see a lot of them potentially duck and dodge out of this because they're terrified of what's going on.
Which makes it much tougher for the Republicans to gain control because now you've got new faces, no name recognition unless you've got somebody famous or whatever. But who's going to want to step into that shit? I mean, it's kind of the same situation we saw with George W. Bush, when he was running. He came out and he had a huge approval rating because of the war that he was involved in. And then toward the end, the economy went to shit and he lost a lot of support. But during that time when he was so popular, no Republican said, I don't want to get in this. I'm just going to get beat. I'm not going to do it. And then Bill Clinton crops up out of nowhere, governor of Arkansas, and he wins the goddamn thing. I mean, these people are going to be nervous about the situation. Being a Republican is not a popular thing to be. What's the point of going to a race you know you're going to fucking lose?
Exactly. And you might see some of them, and the first one that comes to mind might be Marjorie Taylor Greene, go from being a Republican to an independent.
Yeah.
Maybe not fully flipping over to the Democratic side. And if somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene flips to a Democrat, you know what? Much as I can't, if she could win in her district in Georgia as a Democrat, and she stays in the House, maybe that wouldn't be so bad because it would be a pickup of a seat for the Democrats. But ultimately, being connected to the Republicans and being connected to MAGA is going to be something that they're going to have to deal with, and uh, Republicans aren't going to want to deal with it at all. They're going to want to get away from this as far as possible.
Yeah. Well, don't you agree when Donald Trump is done, the whole MAGA fucking thing is going to fall apart? Because if they don't have a cult leader to lead them, they're one guy that they love. I mean, Donald Trump said it himself. One of the reasons they did so badly on Tuesday was because he wasn't on the ballot. I suggest he was on the ballot. It's the shit he's doing that caused them the problems. But without him on the ballot, there's a lot of people that just don't care. People don't give a fuck about JD Vance or anybody else they might put up there.
Yeah, you're right. Without Donald Trump, Republicans are going to struggle,
Yeah.
and Democrats are going to thrive in spite of Donald Trump because of how bad he has done. But there's a section of Republicans that once Donald Trump is out of there, they're not going to deal with it. They're not going to show up and vote every time anymore. They only care about voting for somebody named Trump, and not just anybody named Trump, specifically Donald Trump Sr. And you couldn't run Eric or Don Jr. You couldn't run Ivanka. You couldn't do any of that and still get the same thing. It is because of who he is, because he is the bully, because he is loud. But his bullying tactics aren't working much anymore because he just looks so old and frail and weak at
Yeah. I
every
mean,
turn.
the thing of him continuing to say prices are low, prices are going down. When people walk in the store and they see that's bullshit. I mean, even Republicans have to realize this motherfucker's lying. He's trying to gaslight us, and he's doing a horrible job of it.
Yeah, he is. And we were talking, I think you were talking on your live the other night about this cart full of Thanksgiving supplies
Yeah.
that they were saying was cheaper than versus last year under Biden. But when you dig into it just below the surface, you find out they went from name brand to store brand for almost everything. And there
Yeah.
wasn't nearly as many items in that shopping cart.
In the first one last year, there was 29 items. In this one this year, um, there's 15. Plus, it is off-brand type stuff. So, according to whatever mathematical skills I have, if you have a product that was at one price and now you have a product that is half the value of the first one and you claim it's a 25% discount because it's half of what the first one is, to me that says a 25% increase.
Yeah. Yeah, that is
Fucking dumb.
um oh, it's completely dumb. I mean, he and Donald Trump is trying to say, well, it's only beef that's high right now. Well, last time I went to go get some groceries, it was almost $8 a roll for a pound of ground beef. And
Yeah.
that's here in Iowa, where we grow beef. I
Yeah.
mean, how expensive is it in parts of the country where, they don't grow nearly as much as we do here? It's ridiculous. He can't keep saying that prices are down, prices are down. He has no idea what goes on at a grocery store. And you
No.
have only to look at his comments about voter ID to know that he doesn't know what goes on at a grocery store. He has repeatedly said, and he just said it the other day, you got to show an ID to buy groceries. You got to show an ID at the gas station. There's only about 2 times in either of those locations where you would have to show an ID. Are you buying something that is age restricted, cigarettes, alcohol, dry
Yeah.
ice, or did you write a check? And
Right.
who in the fuck takes checks anymore? I mean, most places don't take them. They rare, it's getting to the point that a lot of places just don't accept them in part because too many people were misusing them and they were bouncing sky high,
Yeah.
which Donald Trump should be familiar with because, well, he never pays his fucking bills anyway. And they said we're not taking them anymore. It's not worth the risk. We want secure payment and we want payment now, which is why things like debit cards, credit cards, and even EBT being on a card, why these stores love it so much because they get access to the money right now. They don't got to
Right.
wait weeks to get paid. They don't have to send in paper food stamps to a clearinghouse that sends it back to the government to get a check from the government 4 to 6 weeks later to finally get paid for that. They get the money in seconds and it's already in their bank account and they can go on and do the next thing.
When I shop for anything, I pay one of three ways. I pay with a credit card, a debit card, or cash. Not once in any of those cases do I get asked for an ID. Never. Just don't. The only other time I might get an ID um, is if I'm at a bar someplace and I buy a drink for my wife because I don't drink. But the reason they card you there is to see if there's any drinking restrictions on your card. Clearly, I'm not 20, but um, he's just oblivious to this. He doesn't look good. There's got to come a point where people start going, all right, fucking enough, enough. I can't do this anymore. And I am just amazed that that didn't happen 2 months after he took office. I really thought it would happen that quickly. But these motherfuckers, they aren't loyal to anybody, but they are loyal to Donald Trump for some reason. It's got to be either fear or stupidity.
I don't think it's either. I think it's about that 20 to 30% of the voting base that they're afraid Donald Trump will get to not show up and vote them back into office. It's
Wow.
about their own power. It is I think it is 100% about staying in power. And they don't want Donald Trump to turn the voters on them and say, okay, well, we're going to primary challenge you. Look at what happened to Liz Cheney. All she did was the right thing, looked into a horrific day where a mob of dumb fucks stormed the Capitol, tried to get to the bottom of it, and Donald Trump said, "Oh, you're a rhino. We're going to primary you," and was successful. You took somebody who was of a well-known political family, the daughter of Darth Vader himself,
Yeah.
Dick Cheney, and turned around and got her out of her seat by running some challenger. I'm not even sure who that person is who replaced her. And, you know, I think some of them are looking at it going, oh shit, we're going to get primaried, not realizing that if they do the job for their constituents that they should do, if their constituents were paying attention, they wouldn't have to worry about any of that.
I was going to ask you, we're coming to the end here, and I wanted to ask you about Iowa. You're the analytical Iowan, and Iowa is a rural state, farming state, a beef state. When I was looking at people that get SNAP, there's a number of people in Iowa that get SNAP, high percentage. I would presume there's a number of people that are on ACA too. What's the vibe around Iowa at this point? I realize you're in only one area and it's a smaller town, but do you get any sense of any change of attitudes amongst Iowans?
I've got this feeling that come 2026, we are going to have a Democratic governor, and
Wow,
we're going to have, I don't know if we're going to have enough momentum to fully flip the state house, but we've already broke the supermajority in the state house, in the state senate. That happened earlier this year in that special election. I think we have a good chance potentially of making progress in the state house. Um, and I think 2 to 4 seats in the House for the national level will flip. I know we only have the 4 seats. I think two minimum flip. If four flip, even I would be surprised because District 4, the northwest corner of the state, it has been held by a Republican for longer than I have been alive. I mean, that's the district that brought us Steve King and that
the
dipshit.
racist,
Oh,
the
no,
unapologetic racist.
yes. I was going to say calling him a racist is probably underselling it a little bit. Um, and, you know, that area is deep red. But if it flips, I mean, we could also potentially have a shift back to a Democratic senator where we have a split in the Senate. We used to have a split. We had, of course, Chuck Grassley, who has been there longer than I've been alive
Yeah,
as a Republican. But for a long time, we had Tom Latham, who was a Democrat, I believe. We had a
right.
split ticket until he'd been there for quite a while until he decided not to run. Then we got stuck with Joni Ernst. I've got a feeling based on the way the protests are going, based on the way, we're seeing special elections go, and with who is running for governor with Rob Sand, I think he has got a good chance, and I think the other Democrats are going to get out of the way. I mean, he is currently the only statewide fully elected Democrat that we have, and he won in 22 when we reelected Kim Reynolds.
Right, right. Well, we're going to wrap things up, but I have one last question. I think people believe that without question, with the way things are going, that the House is going to flip to the Democrats, and maybe even in a big way. Um, you've always but one that's been skeptical about the Senate. It's a harder task for it to flip to Democrats. But with the way things are going now and the way the economy is and the way Donald Trump is going, do you have any different sense about the way the Senate's going to go?
I still say it's possible, not probable.
Okay.
The math is there, but we need four pickups. Okay, it's doable. You got what is it? North Carolina is running Roy Cooper,
Right. And he's a solid candidate down there. He could
solid
be.
candidate, and he is a Democrat who has won statewide office in North Carolina. It is possible he wins. You have here in Iowa, since Joni Ernst didn't run, you have an open seat. with a very popular candidate running for governor. I think Iowa could be a potential pickup. You have James Comey's seat down in Texas, where he's getting primary challenged by Ken Paxton. If Ken Paxton wins that primary challenge, that just helps the Democrats potentially
Yeah.
have a pickup. And Tallarico was fundraising to beat hell. He was doing great. And then you have Maine with depending on who they run,
Well,
you have
Plattner.
Plattner, who is actually looking like he may be a great challenge against Susan Collins. Well, Susan Collins isn't helping her case any because she's always concerned and never actually does anything.
Right.
Um, so if they run, I think if they run Plattner, better chance than if they run his challenger who's 70 some years old. You can't keep running these old people. We were talking about it earlier. They need to get out of the way. And this isn't diminishing anything this person has done in their career. It is just we need younger voices.
Yeah.
And Plattner seems to have some momentum. If all four of just those races go in favor of Democrats, they have the Senate floor. As long as they hold the seats they currently own, they get all of their people reelected. They have the Senate. Then you have Sherrod Brown running in Ohio, I believe, and he's held it before. He has been elected statewide in Ohio. Another potential pickup. I mean, it's possible. I'm still not sure how probable it is. We'll have to see what the polling and stuff looks like in the momentum. If the Democrats hold their own going into with this shutdown and going into the midterms and keep the pressure on, and things continue to get worse for Republicans, they may end up ultimately winning, uh, big in the midterms.
Well, they could theoretically win six, only needing four, but could win six.
Yeah, I mean they need a minimum of four to take control of the Senate because of the fact that the Senate is split 50-50, or would if it splits 50-50, JD Vance would be the tie-breaking vote, which would give the Republicans control. They have to get to 51 to have control of the Senate.
Right.
And one of the things I'm going to keep talking about going into the midterms, why it is so important that the Democrats take the Senate beyond taking the House, which I think is almost a foregone conclusion unless they really fumble here, is because they need to end up uh, being able to prevent Donald Trump from appointing whoever he wants. Or, you know, you right now, Thomas and Alito are saying we're not retiring anytime soon. Well, that could change in 28. If they get to
Definitely.
28 with Donald Trump in power, and if the Republicans still have control of the Senate, they may say, well, we're both going to retire now, so Donald Trump can put in two conservatives that are going to be there for 40 years.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it would be a
Absolutely.
lot harder for them to do that if they wait until after the results of the midterm elections. Not that these Republicans couldn't force somebody through in a matter of weeks, but there would only be about 2 months between the elections and the new Congress being sworn in. That would be a lot harder for them to get the announcement out, say I'm retiring, fill my spot, etc. It wouldn't be as easy. So if Democrats have the Senate, we could potentially prevent a long-term supermajority for Republicans or conservatives on the Supreme Court.
Well, and the other thing too is if Alito and Clarence Thomas did retire and Donald Trump was going to appoint somebody, can't be anybody worse. I mean,
I
it's
don't
not going
know.
to be good.
Aileen Cannon comes to mind.
Well, if the Senate's there, they ain't going to agree to that.
If
No fucking
if it's
way.
a Democratic-controlled Senate, she'd never get through. If
No,
it's
absolutely.
Republicans, I don't know. If they're breaking from him, they may not approve her. If they're still where they're kind of at, and it's only starting to fracture, they might. I don't know what they would do with a nomination of her or somebody like her.
Yeah, good point. All right, I'm going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. Tell us where they can find you. If they haven't found you already, they better fucking get on it.
You can catch me over on TikTok, Blue Sky, or YouTube or Spotify at Analytical Iowan. Same way on all of them. If you find me on one, I've got a link tree. Will take you to anywhere else I've got my content. Um, I put up all my TikToks up on YouTube. You can also catch the Analytical Iowan podcast in video form on YouTube and in audio form on Spotify, working on getting it out to other platforms as well. I think you should be able to also get it on Apple and Amazon now if I've got it done right.
Okay.
So hopefully you can catch the audios out there as well. And that's where you can find me. I keep everything going. Uh, and even if there happens to come a couple days where I don't get any TikToks made, the podcast will still be out there.
Absolutely. And if you follow me, you should be following Eric as well, because we're of a like mind, but we come at it differently. He's more detail oriented. He's more specific. I'm more big picture. If you like what I'm doing, you'll like what Eric is doing. So make sure you follow him. Anyway, thank you for coming on. This has been a long night for me. It's Friday night. I've done two podcasts, so I can do Saturdays and Sundays. So I'm tired. I'm fucking tired. It doesn't take much to tire me out. But thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. It was fun. I love being on the show. And now I get to do double duty because here in a little bit, I've got to record. Well, for everybody listening to this would have been yesterday's podcast. I got to record Saturday's show for the Analytical
Wow.
Iowan podcast. So,
Oh, wow.
yep.
I don't envy you. I don't envy you. For those of you listening, thank you for taking the time. Hope you have a great day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.